Earlier this month, nonpartisan reform group No Labels suspended their plans to launch a bipartisan unity ticket for the 2024 presidential election. Now, while most presidential campaigns are suspended due to lack of funding or lack of support from voters, No Labels suffered the unique problem of lacking a candidate. That's short form for they couldn't find anyone who wanted to run. Now, this seems odd as the appetite for an alternative to the two major parties hasn't been this big in a long time. A recent poll showed only 3 in 10 Americans feel that a Trump Biden rematch is good for the country. And this is a mirror image of polls conducted during the primary that showed 70% of Americans didn't want to see either candidate on the ballot in 2024. Independents are also the largest voting bloc in the country, and support for a third major party is at historical highs. So it begs the question, why, with dissatisfaction with America's two major parties at such a historic high and such a large number of independents apparently up for grabs, wouldn't some savvy political operative come along and use this as a springboard into the White House? And there's no lack of political exiles to choose from. Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, Chris Christie, and Kyrsten Sinema were all pretty much run out of office by their own party. And then there's a whole slew of people who retired from Congress early because it wasn't a place where they could get anything done. But all these savvy political operatives know that even if their chances were slim of winning under their own party, their chances are even smaller running as an independent. See, while No Label's mission to elevate extraordinary leaders who put country over a party is definitely needed in Washington right now, the math behind their third party bid was flawed. So in this video, we're going to talk about the math that makes it hard for independent and minor party candidates to win national elections in the United States, and one reform that could change that math and give us more choices on the ballot. Now, there's a famous quote by Tolstoy that says, "Unhappy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." And I think the same could be said for political independence. See, we often like to think of political independence as some monolithic voting bloc, but the reality is they're pretty diverse. Independents are definitely united in their disdain for America's two major parties. Research by Pew shows that independents are more likely to view both major parties unfavorably, and they have a much higher level of dissatisfaction with the two-party system. But that's where their similarities end. The most recent survey done by the Democracy Fund Voter Study Group showed that while independents are indeed the largest voting bloc, only half of them identify as politically moderate. The remainder either identified as conservative, very conservative, or liberal and very liberal, meaning that while some independents are upset that the candidates are too extreme, others are upset that the candidates aren't extreme enough. Now, among moderate voters, which also outnumbered liberal and conservative voters, independents only comprise about 60%, the remainder being comprised of Democrats and Republicans. So this would indicate that while independents do outnumber Democrats and Republicans and moderates do outnumber conservatives and liberals, the number of moderate independents that are truly up for grabs is actually pretty small, about a quarter of all voters. Independents who identify as conservative or liberal would be more likely to vote for the major party candidate who aligns best with their views, or a minor party candidate who does the same. And No Labels would have to convince the 60% of moderate Republicans and Democrats that casting a ballot for their unity ticket wouldn't spoil the election in favor of the party they like the least. And those numbers only take into account the popular vote. They'd still need to figure out a way to get 270 electoral votes to win the White House. And that leads us to the second reason a centrist bid by No Labels would have a tough time winning. And that's the math behind how we determine who wins an election in the United States. Now, the second big problem that keeps independent and minor party candidates from making a dent in elections is how we determine the winner. This is a system known as first past the post. Now, this effectively means that the person with the most votes wins, which sounds logical. However, it totally breaks down once you add more than two candidates, because think about it this way. In a two-way race, a majority is 50% plus one vote. Seems fair enough. In a three-way race, that margin of victory is 33% plus one vote, and it only gets worse as you add candidates. Now, Trump's 2016 victory was a case study in this, as many were shocked that he managed to flip the traditionally blue states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. People seemed less curious in 2020 when he lost those same states with virtually the same percentage of the popular vote he won them by in the prior election. The difference wasn't that Trump became more or less popular. It was that more people cast ballots for third party candidates in 2016 than in 2020, about 3.5 times more in those respective states. And both campaigns seem keenly aware of this. The Democrats, for their part, have attempted to woo back disaffected voters with the strategy of assembling an army of lawyers to challenge the ballot access for any independent or minor party candidate that might appeal to them. The Trump campaign has been doing the exact opposite by trying to elevate the visibility of minor party candidates who might siphon votes away from Biden, and also trying to depress turnout amongst liberal voters by highlighting Biden's record in Gaza and on the environment. So effectively, both campaigns have acknowledged that this election is Biden's to lose, provided the only other option is Trump. And that's not ruling by majority, that's ruling by default. And there's a better way to go about this. Now, what No Labels failed to recognize when they originally started their push to nominate a bipartisan unity ticket was the fact that their chances of winning the White House were just about the same whether they nominated a candidate or not. History shows that there just wouldn't be enough Democrats or Republicans willing to defect from their own party and cast a ballot for a No Labels ticket to give them the numbers they need to win. Democrats would be too scared about tilting the election in favor of Trump, and Republicans would be too scared about tilting the election in favor of Biden. So a better option for No Labels would be to put that money and that energy behind promoting reforms that will eliminate that problem. And ranked choice voting is probably the best option out there. Now, with ranked choice voting, instead of casting a ballot for one candidate, voters rank their candidates in order of preference. So if I'm a Republican who doesn't really like Trump, I can throw my first choice behind my favorite minor party candidate and still throw my support behind Trump if my candidate doesn't pass the 50% mark needed to win. Same holds true for Democrats. Now, while its use in federal elections is limited, Maine and Alaska show that this does have a way of surfacing more moderate, consensus-minded politicians. Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska are two of the most moderate Republicans in the Senate right now, and are two of the 7 Republicans who voted to convict Donald Trump after the January 6th attack. Mary Peltola of Alaska and Jared Golden of Maine are members of the House's Blue Dog Coalition, a group of conservative Democrats whose stated purpose is to seek bipartisan consensus rather than conflict with Republicans. Sound familiar? No Labels is correct that there's a huge appetite for both moderate candidates and generally candidates who want to go to Washington and actually govern rather than own their opponents on social media. The key is changing our system of elections to make sure that that preference matters. Now, in the description, I've included a link to Rank the Vote. They're an organization that helps foster state-by-state movements to implement ranked choice voting across the nation. So be sure to check that out if you're interested in learning more. I also talk about ways we can make elections more transparent and representative of the will of the people all the time. So be sure to like this video and subscribe if you want to learn more.